Hey guys, it's Villain Theory, and today I'm talking about Falcon, the latest hero announced for Marvel Champions, the card game. First things first, I do want to quickly shout out a giveaway I'm running thanks to Royal7, who's given me these awesome codes that could let you access comics for Falcon. All you have to do is check out the Google form below and enter, and in 4 days' time, 2 lucky winners will be receiving a code each to access one of these comics. It's just a little thing, but I think it's really awesome, so thank you so much to Royal7. And I'm so excited for this one. When I did the live reaction on Nelson's channel, we looked at the hero pack. I said something to the effect of, I'm looking more forward to Falcon than Shuri or Silk's hero pack. And then I went away, thought about it, slept on it, and I'm worrying, oh, Falcon wants all this aerial stuff. Are you just going to deck build a bunch of aerial cards into his deck? Is it, going to get repetitive? Then I did this deep dive, I prepared all the stuff for it, and the more I looked into it, the better and better it got. The more variety there was, the more options there were. Falcon looks awesome. Sorry if that's a spoiler. You might not need to watch the rest of the video if you just wanted a quick opinion. He looks really, really good, really, really fun, but there is a lot to talk through. To give you guys some indication, when I make these deep dives, I normally end up with around 40 to 50 separate image screens that I kind of cycle through. This one I've got over 90, so I'm going to try and go fast. Let's get into it. Let's start with Falcon's hero card. We're going to ignore the alter ego for a little bit, don't usually do this. Falcon has 2 fort, 2 attack, 2 defense. Also, super cool art on almost all of his cards. Absolutely, they knocked it out of the park for this pack. But he's got 2, 2, and 2. Very generic stats, but very useful. Any hero is very happy to have this stat line. He's got the aerial and Avenger traits. Super excited to have new Avengers in the game, by the way. That's amazing. And Falcon's whole big thing is, during the player phase, you play with the top card of the encounter deck face up. And that, my friends, is kind of incredible and changes the context of so many cards, so many different uses for them, just different kind of risk and reward factors. It's enormous, so much information going into the villain phase. We're going to talk about all of this, but this is going to be a big part of the video and really defines Falcon, and I love it. It's kind of reverse Magic, whereas Magic plays for the top of her own deck face up. Falcon, when he's on the board in a hero form in a player phase, you are going to be able to see what's on top of the villain's deck, and a lot of different heroes can interact with this, a lot of different aspect cards, and obviously Falcon's own cards do this as well. He also has this eagle-eyed response. After you play an aerial card, discard the top card of the encounter deck. So no surprise, Falcon, much like Angel, is all about aerial cards. Specifically, whereas Angel really wants aerial events, Falcon just wants any aerial card, and ally with aerial is perfectly good enough for him, and that will trigger this. But what does discarding the top of the encounter deck do? Well, you can see it, and all his other cards basically use the boost icons or boost stars, effects to generate extra value. Very Scarlet Witchy, but also, while I've mentioned Magic already, we've got a Sector Scan from Ironheart. For that card, you get to look at the top card of the encounter deck for a while. I actually thought this ability might be something they give Daredevil, because, he's got echolocation, he can kind of see ahead. But this is pretty cool as well. This is based off the Falcon leadership ally, who gets to look at the top 3 cards, and if there's a treachery, remove threat. He's basically scouting ahead. Now Falcon, with his eagle eyes, is looking ahead. You can see what's on top of the encounter deck. So let's have a look at a couple of Falcon's events and see how he benefits from what the encounter card is on top of the encounter deck. We have Bird of Prey and Bird's Eye View. Very similar names, and they are very similar cards, and kind of in a similar way, they both have amazing art. Both have the aerial trait. One is an attack card, one is a 4 card. Bird of Prey is the attack card, which says deal 4 damage to an enemy. Bird's Eye View says remove 3 threat from a scheme. And I'm talking about them together because they both have the same additional kind of effect, where you discard the top card of the encounter deck, and based on the icons on that card, you get extra damage or extra threat removed. And because they're aerial cards, afterwards you can then trigger Eagle-Eyed, and you're going to start to fly, pun intended, through the encounter deck, discarding cards, trying to line up a good amount of boost icons for your next kind of aerial event, or Falcon cards, some of his upgrades and things use the boost icons, and get the biggest effect you can from them. Now there's a lot of sequencing considerations for this, so I might just play Bird of Prey, and whatever's on top of the encounter deck, I'm going to discard it and hope for the best in terms of the icons on it and what's left beneath it. But I also might choose to play a different aerial card first, maybe an aspect aerial card, which doesn't count the boost icons, trigger Eagle-Eyed, discard the top card of the encounter deck, and hopefully find one with more boost icons, so that now I play Bird of Prey, and I get more damage this time. And then, after playing Bird of Prey, because it makes you discard a card, I can see my encounter card on top of the encounter deck. If there are a good amount of boost icons and I've got more things to use with it, I might choose to leave it there and then, play something else which combos with it. Or it's not got many boost icons and I'm about to end my turn and I want a low boost icons on my card going into the villain phase. I can choose to leave it as well. Or I can choose to trigger the eagle-eyed response on Falcon and discard it, looking for something better. If I'm going to play something else, obviously I'm looking for more icons. If I'm about to end my turn, I'm probably going to try and leave as few boost icons there as possible. Tons and tons to consider, and these are his simplest cards. They are pretty straightforward. Bird of Prey really reminds me of Molecular Decay from Scarlet Witch. Already mentioned Scarlet Witch. She's the other character, really discards from the top of the encounter deck to try and boost up the effects of her cards. But even more than this, it reminds me of a good workout from Domino. In fact, it is exactly the same card, except Domino is discarding from her own deck and counting resource icons, and Bird of Prey is discarding from the villain deck and counting boost icons. I'm pretty sure these were made by the same designer, and I take this a step further because I think Falcon is going to have a lot of similarities to Domino. If you like to play Domino, and let's say use her pistols, use her events, do discarding, and you really enjoy it when, you find a wild and get that extra damage, it's digging deep, you get that thrill of the extra effect you're getting. Well, I think with Falcon, with, cycling through the encounter deck, using his Eagle Eye to discard the top of the encounter deck, keep searching for more and more boost icons to set up his cards and effects, I think that's going to be kind of the same thrill. I think finding Under Fire on top of the encounter deck when you've got some kind of event in hand to get boosted is going to feel really good. You're going to be able to boost Bird of Prey's damage from 4 to 7. 7 damage for a 2-cost card is very, very nice. That's going to feel awesome. And that's kind of similar, in my opinion, on Domino. Finding a digging deep, and boom, I've got an extra resource, I'm doing extra damage. It feels really good. Falcon, kind of to me, as you're kind of spinning through the encounter deck and you're trying to stop it on a good boost icon, feels like a flying slot machine. I think it's kind of, in a way, something like this could have been used for Domino. And I think, Scarlet Witch using the encounter deck to represent kind of the randomness, the chaos of her chaos magic, using the encounter deck to have been luck for Domino, maybe that would have worked well. And with Falcon, looking at the top of the encounter deck being him scouting from above, I think that's really thematic. I think cycling through the encounter deck, hunting for little icons in the corner, you can kind of rationalize it. He's looking for a good opening, but to me, it's sort of turned into just pure mechanics, pure kind of numbers, looking for this icon in this kind of, very gamey, but it is a card game, and I think this is going to be really fun. And I like fun, and I think I'm going to like Falcon. One of my small complaints about Domino is sometimes I feel like she has too much control over what goes on. But as far as I can see for Falcon, when he's going to have a lot of control, you're not going to be able to put the perfect card on top of the encounter deck all the time. And that means you're going to kind of have to choose, do I use this one boost icon and get the effect? Or do I, discard it and hope I get better? But if I get less, then I'm stuck with it. You're going to have interesting kind of risk-reward choices. And I think that's going to be really fun. Overall, these events, I think, are just fine. They're about the plainest cards we've seen in Falcon, just like Domino's kind of equivalent to these are kind of her plainest cards in her kit. But, these are quite complicated characters. I don't think having a simpler attack and thwart card is too bad. So you can spend more of your brain power focusing on the interesting, more unique kind of cards. I do like that there's solid interaction with his main hero mechanic, looking at the encounter deck and discarding and stuff. I'm a pretty big fan of this so far. Now, before we move on, what I really wanted to do was talk more about Falcon's ability to look at the top card of the encounter deck. He's hunting boost icons. He's hunting, the stars as well as the little amplify icons. But we have so much to talk about because it affects so much of the game. If you're a solo player and you are ending your turn with Falcon, you're going to move into the villain phase. During the villain phase, you do not know what the top card of the encounter deck is, but you just saw the top card previously, right, in the player phase. That's not going to change for you. So in solo play, when you go into the villain phase, that top card of the encounter deck goes from being something you can use for your events to something that the villain is going to use to hurt you with. Having perfect knowledge of the boost card you're about to get means Defiance becomes really, really useful. This is a 0-cost card, which when a boost card on an enemy attacking you would be turned face up, discard it instead. If you know that boost card has 0 boost icons on it, something like Advance from Standard 1, you would not use Defiance because it would make no difference. Falcon would know that. Or if there's a bunch of boost icons and you're going to get hurt, Falcon will know that as well. And he's definitely playing Defiance. I think that's awesome. If you're getting attacked, again, maybe there's 0 boost icons, you might choose not to block with an ally and just take the damage because it's only going to be, 1 or 2 damage probably on standard mode. But if you had just seen 3 boost icons on top of the deck before you ended your turn, you might want to chump block with that ally in a hurry so you don't take massive amounts of damage. And We can even take this a little bit further when you're about to deck out and, reset your deck and get an extra encounter card. What you leave on top of the encounter deck at that moment is the encounter card you're going to be getting. So you need to be a little bit careful of that, but that's potentially very powerful to set that up. And we're going to talk more about setting up encounter cards, because if you stun or confuse the villain, and there are quite a few ways to do that in the game across most of the aspects now, whatever card you leave on top of the encounter deck at the end of the player phase, now it's not your boost card because the villain is stunned or confused for you, assuming they're not steady or stalwart. Now that card is your encounter card. It's very much like Gambit with his Ultriga ability, being able to look at the top card of the encounter deck. If he confuses them, then you get a lot of control over what your encounter card is. Falcon, by doing this, has so much control. I haven't played Falcon yet. I don't know how an average turn is going to go, but I imagine you're seeing at least 2 to 3, maybe even 4 encounter cards on top of the encounter deck per turn. You potentially have a choice out of 4 cards as to what might be your encounter card. That is huge. It's not going to work out exactly like that, and I definitely need to play it to say anything definitive, but it's going to be at least as much control as Gambit would have. That's particularly good. So Falcon running some stuns and confuse is going to have so much control over his encounter card. It's going to be very safe for solo play, and players who like control, players who hate losing randomly to advance, are going to really like Falcon decks with stun or confuses. Now, because we can see the top card of the encounter deck during the player phase, Cosmo is never going to miss. When he attacks with forts, you have to try and guess what the top card of the deck is. You can see the top card of the encounter deck. He's never going to, fail that. He's never going to take that consequential damage, and you're going to be able to help cycle the encounter deck as well for Falcon's abilities. So Cosmo and Falcon are really good friends. We've also got Wiccan in Justice, 2-cost ally as well. Response after Wiccan fort, discard the top card of the encounter deck. For each boost icon discarded this way, deal 1 damage to an enemy. So you can kind of set Wiccan up to do lots of damage, or alternatively, you can use Wiccan to discard weak boost cards to try and find something better for one of your events and line something else a little bit different up. In either case, Wiccan is going to be really good for Falcon. Wiccan is also an Avenger. Falcon, new Avenger hero, gets to use stuff like Earth's Mightiest Heroes and Avengers Tower. We also have an ally like Havoc, 4-cost, forced to interrupt when he attacks, discard the top card of the encounter deck, and I think you guys have the drill at this point. We've got Gambit, who came in Nightcrawler's pack semi-recently, and let me tell you, Gambit is an absolutely phenomenal ally, and just having more kind of knowledge about what he's going to find, that's going to be really good to power up Gambit. And we've even got events which kind of benefit from this too. Return the Favor is discard cards until you find a Treachery card, reveal that Treachery, then get some damage on the villain. Because you can see the top card of the encounter deck, if you see a weaker Treachery at the top, you might choose to pull the trigger on Return the Favor, and, reveal that weak Treachery, boom, you get 5 damage on the villain. I think that's fun. Taunt, you make the villain attack you, you know exactly what that boost card is going to be. If it's a really big attack, you might just choose not to use it. If it's a small attack, yeah, fine. Gonna taunt the villain, gonna draw a bunch of cards. Seems good to me. Now, what's fun about Return the Favor and Taunt, and honestly the allies we've been looking at too in many ways, because Falcon's ability still works during the player phase on a different player's turn. If you're in multiplayer, 2, 3, or 4, you could be playing Falcon in leadership, and your protection player could then benefit from seeing the top of the encounter deck for something like Return the Favor or Taunt, and that's where some of the multiplayer combos and synergies really start to shine. Falcon has a lot of them, but he also has a lot of strengths just in solo play, so whether you play solo or multiplayer, Falcon is going to have different strengths based on the player count, which is very, very cool. And while I've largely been focused on talking about how these allies or events benefit from being able to see the top of the encounter deck, playing these events also benefits Falcon for his other stuff, like the Bird of Prey and Bird's Eye View cards we already looked at. Because if I use Return the Favor after it finishes resolving, because I discarded, I looked for a Treachery and so on and so forth, after it's all resolved, there's going to be a new card on top of the encounter deck. So Falcon's Eagle-Eyed ability, after playing Aerial card, discards the top of the encounter deck. That's going to give me a new option on top of the encounter deck for my other cards. Return the Favor, going to do exactly the same thing. Doesn't need to trigger Eagle-Eyed. It's just because it's interacted with the encounter deck, there's something new on top of the encounter deck. Exactly the same for Taunt, same for Wiccan, same for Cosmo. I cannot stress enough that Cosmo is going to be so, so good. Also want to shout out Pool Card War. I won't go through this whole card because it's a little bit complicated, but long story short, you want as few boost icons on the top card of the encounter deck when you use it, so you don't take damage and, try and get some damage onto the villain or whatever enemy you're targeting. Falcon's ability to look at the top of the encounter deck during the player phase makes War extraordinarily reliable. So Falcon even has a little bit of a pool synergy just from his identity card, which I think is fantastic. And there are a lot more cards like this, kind of like Taunt, we've got Bait and Switch and Toe to Toe. We have Sentry as well, who deals an encounter card to the player, who plays him, which can be devastating, but since Falcon can see what it is, if you can get away with playing Sentry, his stats are incredible, and he can often carry the rest of the game. In Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., we just got Melinda May, who can look at the top card of the encounter deck and possibly discard that card, which means Falcon can have extra control over what's on top of the encounter deck if you pay out for that 4-cost ally. Then we have Blindfold, Global Logistics, one way or another, Injustice. These cards are just incredible in general, at least for the lower player counts, but they can have potential in the higher player counts, just a bit trickier. Blindfold and Global Logistics, mess around with the top of the deck, line things up for Falcon, I love it. One way or another, you search for a side scheme. Once you've found one, you shuffle the deck. That's going to be something new on top of the deck for Falcon to potentially use. Oh, and you draw 3 cards still. Perfectly good. So while these aren't aerial cards, they're not triggering Eagle-Eyed, because of their effects, you're still getting the effect of Eagle-Eyed. You're going to get to see a new card on top of the encounter deck, which is what Falcon is hunting for, looking for good cards to play his events, trigger his upgrades, and so on. Oh, and I should also mention Shuri comes with Going Undercover, which is a player's side scheme, which has a little bit of kind of like Global Logistics and Blindfold kind of energy to it, lets you mess with what's on top of the deck. So Justice has a lot of toys that Falcon might potentially really like. Now, we talked about one way or another summoning in side schemes, but we've also got minion summoning. If you discard cards from the top of the encounter deck to find a minion, spoiler alert, there's going to be something new on top of the encounter deck, and Falcon might really benefit from that. In fact, maybe the card on top of the encounter deck, when you played the minion summoning card, like Squared Off or Come Get Me Bub, was a minion, maybe a particularly weak one, and that's why you chose to play Squared Off or Come Get Me Bub at that point, to get that minion into play and then get the other benefits. It's going to be really fun. We've got a new leadership ally. I don't know how to pronounce this, a Hugin and Munin. That's a card we're going to talk about more later, but also involves minion summoning. So that's going to help shuffle things up for Falcon. Leadership and Aggression both have one or more aerial events which benefit from multiple minions being out. So there's definitely potential here. There's a lot more to talk about, a lot more things that interact with, his ability to see the top card of the encounter deck. This is a deep dive, so I want to cover as much as possible, but we're going to take a break for a little bit, and most of the others are going to kind of unfold naturally, but I'm pretty sure I've missed some too, just because it changes up so many cards. But let's move on. Let's talk about his alter ego, and let's talk about Redwing. So Redwing is his signature ally, 2 cost, 1/4, 1 attack, 2 hit points. Not that impressive, but we then see the Aerial Avenger and Bird trait. Now, the Bird trait interacts with his alter ego, and weirdly, Bird's Eye View, Birds of Prey, those cards have bird in the name, not in the trait. Probably going to confuse some people, but for Sam's alter ego ability, we are really looking for the bird trait. Let's focus on Redwing again for a second. What makes this card good is the hero action. So hero action exhausts Redwing, return him to your hand, and discard the top of the encounter deck. Before we even talk about the benefits that come after this, I just want to say that by exhausting him and returning him to your hand, you're kind of getting a refund of part of his cost. If I play a 2-cost ally, and then the ally comes back to my hand, I could then spend him as a card on something else, or, play him again, so on and so forth. But returning something to your hand is potentially giving you a resource back. So if we're using this ability on Redwing, we can effectively think of all the benefits we've got from him as being equivalent to a 1-cost card. So after you exhaust him and return him to your hand, you discard the top card of the encounter deck, and you get to deal X damage or remove X threat, where X is equal to the number of the boost icons or boost stars on the discarded card's boost area. Basically, it's kind of the same as his attack and thwarting event, except Redwing can deal damage or remove threat. He's kind of flexible in that regard. But prior to using this hero action, he's probably only attacked for 1 or thwarted for 1, and it might have had to have been on a different turn, definitely for the first time you're playing Redwing, because he would be exhausted from that, so you could not exhaust him and return him to your hand. It's kind of a pacing consideration why you need to exhaust him. But guess what? When he's back in your hand, play him again, attack or thwart. Next turn, you can hero action, exhaust him, return to your hand, get the benefit again, and keep the cycle kind of going. A little bit like the Starhawk ally, a little bit like the Penny Parker SPDR ally in Basic. This is an ally that you can play every single turn, and kind of gives you better value the second time around onwards. I think Redwing is just extremely flexible, and I think that's really good, because he's got the aerial trait. He counts as an aerial card. He's going to trigger Eagle-Eyed on Falcon's hero card, so every turn, if you return Redwing to your hand and play him again, you're getting an extra trigger of Eagle-Eyed to find better boost icons and things for your other cards. I think that's pretty good. The problem is, to make Redwing efficient, you are still going to want to hit a couple of boost icons, in my opinion. If you can get him to remove 3 threat or deal 3 damage between his attack stat, thwarting stat, and the boost icons removed, then you've got a good deal. But if he's only, basic attacking for 1, then dealing 0 to 1 damage with his hero action, probably didn't get a great deal. But I will say that Red Wing combos with Earth's Mightiest Heroes and Avengers Tower, pretty nice to have a reliable source for that, and also team building exercise. If you keep returning Red Wing to your hand and keep playing him again, you can trigger Avengers Tower and team building exercise with 100% accuracy every single turn, and that's pretty useful to make sure you're always getting value from them. There's also Power of Flight resource card that came with Angel. That works perfectly for Red Wing, and also the new blue bird ally you guys have probably seen here on the side, mentioned them earlier, Hugin and Munin. They're really, really fun. They do something completely different. You get to, search the top 10 cards of the encounter deck for a minion after you play them, put it into play engage with you, and for getting that minion, you get to ready one character you control for each boost icon in that minion's boost area, which is potentially really good, but not for every character. But if your name is 4, you're going to love it. And there's a few others that benefit from getting minions in, or a few characters that actually really benefit from being able to ready characters. There's potentially a world where you play Hugin and Munin on, let's say, X23 with a Honey Badger ally out, ready up both characters, and you're going to get so much value from that. So a lot of potential with this card, and I think Sam will really like it too, because he can obviously line up the boost icons. He gets benefit from Hugin and Munin just being aerial, and there's a lot of new aerial stuff that combos with them. So both the new blue ally and Red Wing have that bird trait, which is what interacts with Sam Wilson's hero card. I should have pointed out earlier, hand size 6 in Ultra Ego, hand size 5 in hero form, hit points 10. Really, with his free recovery as well as his 2 in every stat in hero form, he's got the most basic hero stats anyone could have. But his ability is very in-depth, so I think that's totally fine. And in fact, having kind of plain stats gives you kind of a lot of options because not a lot of avenues are ruled off, so it bodes well for the variety of deck builds he can have. He has a shield trait in Alter Ego, and he has this action, Birds of a Feather. Discard 1 card from your hand, search your deck and discard pile for a bird card and add it to your hand. This means we can get Red Wing at the very beginning of the game, and because of his ability to return him to his hand, then we can play him again. Effectively, if we get Red Wing on turn 1, we could potentially have him on every single turn of the entire game, barring, any kind of weird encounter card stuff. But we can just go Alter Ego again, use Birds of a Feather, and find Red Wing from our discard pile. So Red Wing is a very loyal signature ally that we can kind of have from the beginning, and he's going to keep helping us. So I kind of like that. I do kind of think after you've got the Red Wing loop going, you might not really have a lot of motivation to go back down to Alter Ego. Getting Hugin and Munin is pretty good. Kind of, but you're going to want to do it when you start Alter Ego and can go back to hero form that turn. He does have a card that kind of helps with that, which is interesting. But for me, Sam is potentially a character that doesn't want to go Alter Ego again unless he really, really has to. To talk about a couple of Falcon's upgrades, we have Aerial Evacuation, which is a 1-cost aerial preparation card, and we have Draw Their Fire, which is a 1-cost per person aerial preparation card. Having preparation cards already puts Agent Coulson and Practice Plan on the table as great options for him, and I think they are potentially going to be very good depending on what kind of build you're going for. So Aerial Evacuation is the 1-cost upgrade. Here at Interrupt, when another friendly character will be dealt any amount of damage, discard Aerial Evacuation. Prevent all of that damage and change to Alter Ego form. If that character is a hero, they also change to Alter Ego form. Okay, in solo play, this card is less desirable because you have to exhaust with an ally to defend. Then when they would take damage, you can use Aerial Evacuation to kind of swoop in and then block the damage. It's still decent, but it will just hurt the tempo of your ally use a little bit, but it's fine. You get to go to Alter Ego, going to be able to use your Alter Ego ability, then turn back to hero form to, play that bird and benefit from it maybe a little bit more then. So that's kind of good. In multiplayer, this is just really, really well costed to block an entire attack for another character. And not only do you change your character to Alter Ego form, you change a second character to Alter Ego form. It's really powerful to mess around with forms like that. Has a lot of potential use, very fun combos. So I'm a big, big fan of this. Draw Their Fire, on the other hand, being 1 cost per person is, super exciting design. I really like that. It's a hero response which says after the villain phase begins, discard Draw Their Fire. Falcon does not exhaust to defend until the end of the phase. This means that if you're in 4-player, you can defend for every single character at that table, potentially from all 4 attacks. If everyone's in hero form when the villain's attacking, great. And if any encounter cards are attacks as well, you can defend those. And if there are any minions out, you can defend all of those as well. This sounds awesome, but it does scale, its cost to play a little bit, but it is fairly generous in that regard. The only problem is Falcon starts with 2 defense. Obviously, if you're in protection, you can play Armored Vest, things like that. You can boost his defense up a little bit, but he doesn't start with great numbers here. I'm thinking, however, Falcon is probably going to get a defense boost on one of his upgrades, something to that effect. I don't have any guarantees, but I want to share a quick theory with you guys before we get back into analysing what we actually know. In the article for Falcon that Fantasy Flight Games posted that revealed him, there was this line of text. A longtime partner of Steve Rogers, Sam has even taken on the shield and title of Captain America to serve as a soaring symbol of truth. Now, this was a little bit in his background section, so maybe this doesn't reflect his hero kit whatsoever, and I'm just, reading a bit too much into this. But what if Falcon came with a card called Captain America's Shield, which just did, exactly the same thing as that card does in Captain America's hero kit, one crisp upgrade that gives him +1 defense and retaliate. That would go so well with Draw Their Fire. Is he going to have it? I'm not sure. Would it be amazing? I think so. But we'll have to wait and see. There's also a world where he's got some kind of wing upgrade, and that gives him a defense boost. I think that's semi-likely as well, so who knows? Outside of that, I think Draw Their Fire is still potentially very interesting, with a lot of combos in protection. Next up, we have Talon Line. I love this art. 2-cost upgrade. It's an item, so Jubilee can go shopping for it. Hero response. After you resolve Falcon's eagle-eyed ability, discard Talon Line. For each icon in the discarded card's boost area, choose one. Ready a character you control, or stun an enemy. Let's say I play an aerial card. Afterwards, I can use Falcon's response to discard the top of the encounter deck. And let's say it's got 2 boost icons. I can then, with Talon Line, trigger its response, and I can ready both, let's say, Falcon, and I can stun the villain. This is pretty good for a 2-cost card. The only problem is, just trying to line up with the boost card to make it valuable. This gains a ton of value at 2 boost icons and is absolutely useless if, there's 0 boost icons. If there are 3 boost icons, maybe multi-villain scenario, I can stun a whole bunch of enemies. If I've got a bunch of cool allies out, I can ready all of those up. There's some really cool combos with this card. My only real disappointment with Talon Line is it doesn't have the tech trait, because I actually looked this up. I was like, what the heck is the Talon Line? Is that a tooth on there? Apparently it's controlled by like cybernetic stuff. It seems kind of like techy. I think he could have had tech on it, just a little bonus for him. Just a little synergy with the new shield supports, Fitz and Gemma. Then we need to talk about Aerial Recon. And brace yourself, guys. This 1-cost upgrade, Aerial and Tactic traded. Playing these preparations with Aerial and even this upgrade here with Aerial, still going to trigger Eagle-Eyed, by the way, so that's pretty handy for Falcon. Aerial Recon is insane, like absolutely crazy, like super crazy bold design, very, very powerful. One of my viewers left a comment on my previous video saying this might be the strongest card in solo play ever, and it's hard to disagree with that when you realize what it does. But also, I will spoil that it has tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of potential multiplayer uses and combos. So pretty awesome card, whatever your perspective is. Hero action. Exhaust Aerial Recon and deal a player 1 face-down encounter card. Place 1 Recon counter here. So okay, I played a 1-cost upgrade, and now it's giving me an encounter card. That sucks, but what does a Recon counter do? Well, as an interrupt, when a player would be dealt an encounter card, remove 1 Recon counter here instead. So basically, you're looking at the top of the encounter deck as Falcon, you see a weak encounter card, you use Aerial Recon to deal it to yourself as an encounter card. Then you've got this Recon counter. Then when you go into the villain phase, when you get to the part where you'd receive your normal encounter card, spend that counter, you don't receive the encounter card. Effectively, during your turn, as you're selecting the encounter deck, you see a weak one, you take it, and then you block your future encounter card that you probably cannot see, and that level of control is just remarkable. You can always take a relatively safe encounter card, or at least, an encounter card that won't end the game, and then you just block whatever your encounter card would actually be later on. It is going to give you incredible protection against Advance, against Shadow of the Past, against Under Fire, Expert mode, even against, the Expert 2, Standard 2 stuff. It's going to be so powerful to kind of avoid those things most of the time. Those sudden losses to an unexpected villain activation are kind of going to be a thing of the past. Those horrific encounter cards, which are kind of 2 encounter cards in one, very, very unlikely to hit you once you have Aerial Recon down. And this has the added benefit that most of the nasty encounter cards have a lot of boost icons. So you're going to use those boost icons on Falcon with his events and, Talon Line, things like that, to get big benefits. Then when there's a weak encounter card, they typically have less boost icons. You can use Aerial Recon to give it to yourself and hopefully find more boost icons on the following encounter card on top of the encounter deck to combo with whatever else you've got in the rest of your hand. Honestly, we can kind of ignore how Falcon benefits otherwise from selecting the encounter deck with Aerial Recon. Just the control here is phenomenal, and I just cannot stress enough how good I think this card is. Maybe a little bit less if you're a rush player, if you're a newer player and you don't have a good grasp of, what encounter cards are worse than others, or how, your deck kind of functions if you found a deck online rather than, build it and test it yourself. You might not be able to prioritize the encounter cards perfectly, but it's pretty easy to see, really bad ones and avoid those, and which don't seem to be that bad, and take them. So for solo play, this card is amazing. Let's take it to multiplayer and look at some of the combos. I want to start with Star-Lord. Star-Lord has an ability, What Could Go Wrong, where you deal yourself an extra face down encounter card. Some of his events do that as well. Now you can see that in advance and make the decision with perfect information. As long as Falcon is on the table with you in hero form in the player phase, you can see what Star-Lord is going to gain. But even more than that, Aerial Recon, which we're talking about now, can use the hero action to deal Star-Lord an encounter card. Because he's now got an encounter card in front of him, that's powered up Sliding Shot, powered up Gutsy Move. When he goes to draw cards at the end of the phase, if he's got his helmet in play, he's going to get an extra card there for having an extra encounter card in front of him. It's really, really good. And then you can just use the interrupt on Aerial Recon to cancel Star-Lord's normal encounter card he would be getting that he doesn't much benefit from. I think that's amazing. Just, look out for those weaker encounter cards, and Star-Lord's going to have a surprisingly safe time. What could go wrong? Well, Falcon can scatter out and tell you exactly what could go wrong. Now, the pool aspect for Falcon is kind of interesting. We already talked about War, but what we're going to talk about here even works in multiplayer with a different character playing in the pool aspect. Pool kind of has its second Shadow of the Past, Crisis of Infinite Deadpools, and you get stuck with Dreadpool. He's an annoying minion who you defeat. When defeated, he kind of gets dealt back to you as an encounter card. Well, when you're dealt an encounter card, you can interrupt it with Aerial Recon and cancel it. Falcon is so good at scouting, he can see Dreadpool trying to get back towards you and kind of warn you away from him. Aerial Recon blocks Dreadpool's when defeated effect is the long story short here, and that is pretty amazing. 4 is another character that will really benefit from this. If you see a minion on top of the encounter deck as Falcon, you can use Aerial Recon to deal it to 4. Now, when 4 goes to reveal that in the villain phase, he'll get to draw 2 cards from Have At Thee, and that is amazing. And he's just pretty good at dealing with minions, so it just lines up in a really nice way. And 4, of course, really likes minion summoning. He has Defender of the Nine Realms in his signature cards. So if you see a weak minion on the top of the deck, he could take an action and make sure he gets that weak minion that way, and then gets to draw cards in the player phase. So just Falcon and 4 are going to be a great combo as well. Kind of in the same vein, we've got a bunch of heroes which really can benefit from defeating minions. Either they're really good at it, or some of their events give them extra bonuses for doing so. Rocket is probably the big one here, but also Valkyrie. These characters don't need to engage that minion, but just using Aerial Recon to get a minion and block a different encounter card is going to just up the consistency of these things and be really good. Spider-Ham loves to take damage in small amounts because he gets a toon counter. If you see an encounter card that does that, deal it to him and then block someone else's encounter card. Great. Spider-Man gets benefits from being attacked. Bishop can potentially heal even more with his uniform if he knows a second attack is coming in advance. Dealing these characters' attacks has some extra kind of things to consider and can be pretty decent. So on the flip side, we've got characters like Groot and Colossus. They don't want to get damaged. They don't want to lose growths counters. They don't want to lose toughs necessarily. So what you can do is deal yourself an extra encounter card in the hero phase. Then when the villain phase comes around, use that recon counter to block whatever Groot and Colossus would get, so they don't lose, the tough or growth counters. Deadpool is very similar. If he uses the Regenerate and Degenerate ability, he ends up Ultra Ego with 1 HP. If his encounter card says, take 1 damage, take 3 indirect damage, something like that, it can be game over for him. So just making sure he never really has to reveal many encounter cards throughout a game is such a huge boost to him that lets him go absolutely crazy. There's so much more I could talk through. I don't know if I really need to. One character I do want to mention is Silk. It feels like Silk and Falcon were made to work together. Silk has this Silk Sense response. After you defeat a minion or side team or resolve a treachery, tuck that card under here from the encounter discard pile. If you give her an extra encounter card and block yours, she's just going to have so many more things to, Silk Sense, so many more treacheries if you line that up. But if you just make sure you're getting minions in the side schemes, not, attachments and obligations, it's going to help her find more cards to power her abilities anyway. She's got this eidetic memory card as well, which lets you, when you reveal a card from the same encounter set as a card already tucked under her, you get to swap those cards around. Falcon can see what she's got tucked under her, maybe give her something matching to swap around if it's a favorable swap, that kind of thing. It's just really interesting things to consider when dealing out and blocking these encounter cards. I kind of love it. I really need to move on from Aerial Recon, but hopefully you can see there are tons and tons and tons of multiplayer combos. There's even more than I've said here. And in solo, it offers, I don't know, I'll call it anti-swinginess. You're still going to get an encounter card, but you can make sure it's not a game-ending one. Swinginess is one of the kind of main pitfalls of solo play, the main challenge kind of to navigate in comparison to multiplayer. Aerial Recon solves it. 10 out of 10 card in terms of power and I think fun. If Falcon is a flying slot machine, Aerial Recon is, he lets him cheat the system and beat the odds. Before we move on, I normally talk about, all the card count, because this is all the hero cards we've seen so far. I want to talk about Scarlet Witch. I mentioned her a little bit already, but she's the other character that really messes with the top of the encounter deck. She doesn't know what it is. It's kind of simulating her chaos magic. With Falcon, she knows exactly what it is. Hexbolt, you know exactly one of the cards you're going to get 100%. You kind of know whether Chaos Control is worth using or not. That's the card that lets you replace one of the cards you're carrying boost icons from. And she can use Chaos Control or her crest to also help Falcon with his abilities, which I think is really cool. Add on to this, if Scarlet Witch is in the game, she has 2 obligations that go into the encounter deck, where they've got 3 boost icons each, which not only powers up Scarlet Witch's own cards, but it powers up Falcon's events and things as well. So that's pretty cool. You're increasing the average amount of boost icons per encounter card in the encounter deck, which is good for both characters. To talk about Falcon's card count, we've got 1 signature ally, obviously. We've got 2 copies of his attack event, 2 copies of his fort event, possibly 3 copies of the fort event. We don't know cards 6, 7, 8, or 9. Then we have a scattering of his 2 preparation cards, and then his 2 other upgrades, one of which is kind of preparation-y. It gets discarded after you use it as well. I don't know if this guy's good at damage, forwarding, or defending, or if he's just, really a solid all-rounder, jack of all trades, because that's kind of what it feels like. Before we move on, I want to talk about what these potential missing cards could be. I've had a few ideas. Now, I think one of the obvious ones people always say when a card is missing is, oh, it could be a defense event. I do realistically think there's a good chance it is a defense event, but since his events seem to follow the domino philosophy, since a couple of his upgrades do interact with defending or not taking damage, a little bit like, Domino's got probability field and lucky but good, which kind of help her not take as much damage. Following that kind of blueprint possibly makes me think he won't have any defense events, but we'll see. I feel like he has a really good chance to have aerial resource cards, kind of like Avian Anatomy that Angel had. He has Adam Warlock in his precon. Adam Warlock is an ally that likes you to, as part of his ability, discard a card with multiple resource icons on it, so it makes sense for me to find one here. I also think he might have a card like Luck Be a Lady or Hexbolt. These are cards which want you to discard something to get a benefit, but rather than turn, let's say, 3 icons into 3 damage, they count the specific number or type of what they find and give you a specific result. Since he has this special bird kind of finding thing on his alter ego, I think a bird support, maybe that functions in alter ego, makes a lot of sense. Maybe that even has the bird trait to help, find it and play it. I don't know. I already teased the idea that Falcon might have Captain America's shield, but he could also have a card with the title trait. We've seen a few of those recently, and the article did mention, took up Captain America's title. The title card, if he does have such an upgrade, could then give him a discount on allies, a bit like Captain America's alter ego, or it could let him ready up for discarding a card, just like Captain America's hero form. I think that'd be kind of a fun way to inherit that power by playing an upgrade of some kind. My final guess is he will have a card called Vibranium Wings, and that is a pretty crazy card. Now, Vibranium Wings, I think, could do similar to Techno-Organic Wings, that can ready you. We can also give you resource discounts, but I definitely think there's a high chance that Falcon will have some kind of stat boosting card, plus forwarding, plus defense seems the 2 most likely candidates, and the Wings could definitely do one or both of those as well. So guys, we can finally go through deck building with Falcon, what cards you might want to use from the aspects and basic cards. This has already been a long video, so go grab another coffee, grab your pizza, whatever you want to do. I'm going to go through all the new leadership precon stuff as well here, rather than do a separate video, because it works so well for Falcon. So into basic, we first of all have the Power of Flight. This is a double resource card toward aerial cards. It doesn't matter if it's an event or an ally. If it's got the aerial trait, it's going to give you 2 resources. Team building exercise is also really good for anything with the aerial trait if you're playing an aerial hero. This is a card where you exhaust it, and then you get to play a card with a trait that matches your hero, in this case probably aerial, but it could also be Avenger, reduced by 1 cost. There is some kind of anti-synergy between Power of Flight and team building exercise. We have yet to see an aerial card in Sam Wilson Falcon's hero kit, which costs more than 2. So if I discount one of his cards by 1 with team building exercise, Power Fight is going to be overpaying for it. There's going to be excess resources. But if you have, let's say, 2 cards that are 2 cost each and with the aerial trait, I can discount 1 with team building exercise, pay for the other with Power Flight. It just depends how many aerial cards you're going to be having in your average hand. I think it's going to be a lot, but it will depend slightly on your deck building. The other aerial card we kind of have in basic is Soaring Acrobatics. Doesn't have the aerial trait, but this 2-cost upgrade does, when an aerial character you control uses a basic power, lets you exhaust it to get +1 to this power. It's kind of a mixture of Heroic Intuition, Combat Training, and Armored Vest all in one, but if you ready up, you don't get the benefits the second time. It's just 1 use, kind of a little bit like Venom's Pistols. While there are exceptions, I don't typically run soaring acrobatics, on most of my aerial characters, but sometimes the versatility it offers is really useful. What's more exciting to me are the basic allies. We've got Vivian, super good ally in general. The ability to blank stuff should not be underestimated. The harder the difficulty goes, and also the higher the player count, the better she gets, because she has more targets and more meaningful targets. Then we have Angel, who on an X-Men or Mutant character will typically be 2 cost effectively. The cost gets reduced, but on other characters he's a 3 cost. You might be thinking, oh, Falcon's not a mutant or an X-Men, he won't want to play Angel. And that was my first thought, but my second thought was, Angel has better stats than the average 2-cost ally. And since Angel is aerial, he is going to trigger the eagle-eyed ability on Falcon, and he can be paid for with, team building exercise, power of flight. I actually think he might be a good option. Then we have Cannonball, who's a phenomenal option for Falcon, 3-cost ally. When Cannonball would take any amount of consequential damage, you reduce it by the number of aerial cards in your hand. If you're playing an aerial character who's all about aerial cards, you probably deck build a lot of those into him as well. Cannonball probably just isn't taking consequential damage, and that's very, very valuable. He's just 2 attack or 2 forwarding every single turn, unless you get unlucky. But even if you only have 1 aerial card in hand, you can use him once and he'll still be alive on the board with 1 HP. So I really like him. I think Cannonball goes in every one of my Falcon decks for the most part, unless I'm trying to do something, with the Avenger trait, something like that. Cannonball is amazing. Next up in leadership, we've got existing card Cloud9, a 3-cost ally which you can exhaust to give all aerial characters +1 forwarding. Now we've got the attack version in Aero coming in Falcon's Precon. This card is pretty good. I actually really like the ability to give attack to all the aerial characters. In multiplayer, you could potentially be running a leadership aerial build alongside maybe a protection aerial character who has a good attack stat and lots of rating and protection. There's a lot of combo potential here that I really like. Falcon will like this, team building exercise, power of flight. It's going to trigger Eagle-Eyed. Both of these allies are going to trigger that. But we have Flight Squadron, which is a new 2-cost support. It's a new team card. The first one that isn't kind of locked to being, Avengers or Guardians, the typical teams. And instead, you're finding unity within the ability to fly. I love this idea. I think it's a very powerful card. If each of your allies has the aerial trait, increase your ally limit by 1. This is basically the Triskelion, which is a 1-cost card in its own right that is fairly popular to put in deck still. But also, this gains the response after you play an aerial card, exhaust this card, ready an ally you control. Aero could be exhausted to give all your aerial characters +1 attack, including Falcon, your identity. Then you could play some kind of attack card Falcon has. You would get to trigger Flight Squadron's response and ready Aero back up. Exhaust her again. Now Falcon has an extra +2 attack, so do all your other aerial allies, and that starts to get pretty potent. Even more so if Aero is choosing to use her hero action, let's say on a protection player who's also aerial with lots of readying. I think the sky is the limit. Now, Flight Squadron, I think, will be a pretty good card for Angel, but I even can see myself using this for 4. I can see myself using it maybe for Nova. I can see myself using it for 4. I can see myself using it for Spectrum. And any new aerial-focused characters that come out in the future probably going to benefit from this a lot. Already in leadership, we have Flying Formation that came with Angel, ready up to 3 aerial characters. Typically, there haven't always been, the perfect candidates to make this ready. It's very expensive ready at 4 cost. Worth it. But if we just have Falcon and Aero on the board, we already have 2 good targets for this, so we only need 1 more. I think that's pretty fun. And of course, as an aerial card, this is going to trigger our Eagle-Eyed ability on Falcon. Speaking of Falcon, we've got the other Falcon, kind of the apprentice of Sam Wilson, I believe. We've got, I'm just going to call him Torres, 4-cost ally, and he readies champion characters. Now, Sam Wilson Falcon is not a champion, unfortunately, but Cloud9 is, and we've also got Snowguard as a potential champion who can gain the aerial trait. So I think that's kind of interesting. Maybe Falcon runs Falcon, if any, for thematic reasons. Not quite sure, but I kind of want to try and explore it. Then, of course, we've got Command Team. If we're boosting our stats with either Cloud9 or Aero, maybe we want to ready up Aero or Cloud9 and get even more stat boosting. Definitely potential there, definitely something to explore. Next up to talk about, we've got Sky Cycle, a 1-cost upgrade which you attach to an Avenger ally. That attached ally gains Aerial. That's pretty huge. Now we have more things that will synergize with Flight Squadron, with Aero, with Cloud9. There's definitely some big combo potential here. Maybe it's a little bit janky. I don't know if it's really going to be super, super viable. We'll have to see how it shakes out to combine all this, but definitely worth talking about. A readying card that I think Falcon is definitely going to like is Inspiring Presence. I think this is often forgotten about. Heal 1 damage from an ally and ready it. This is pretty good value. It's a pretty nice combination just to keep something going. Definitely worth considering this with some of the combos we're seeing. Air Supremacy is probably the most known leadership kind of aerial card. It's really, really good. 2 cost, and you get to choose up to X enemies where X is equal to the number of aerial characters you control. Deal 3 damage to each chosen enemy. So if there are 4 minions on the board, let's say I'm in 4-player, just where that's more common, and I have 4 aerial characters, let's say Falcon and 3 allies, I get to play this 2-cost card and deal 12 damage, 3 to each of those 4 minions, 3 for each aerial character I have out, which will be Falcon and those 3 allies I mentioned. The ceiling with this card is really high, and you only need 1 minion and a villain available to hit to make Air Supremacy really work out for its cost. I think 2 minions is more ideal, but nonetheless a very, very good card, which we can combine with relatively new card Squared Off from Magneto's pack, which helps you, summon in minions for benefits. And we also have the new ally Hugin and Munin, and we also have the new ally I discussed, Hugin and Munin, which as a response get to search the top 10 cards of the encounter deck for a minion, very much like the Angela ally. So leadership decks can potentially have 4 minion summoning cards, 5 if you include Face the Past. So potentially get out a couple of minions, and then Air Supremacy is just going to go crazy. I think this is going to be a really fun deck. I think one of the concerns you might have is how many aerial allies are there for me to run Squared Off and get consistent targets for it? Well, actually, for 3 costs, there are quite a few aerial characters between basic and leadership allies. Now, unfortunately, one of these on the screen is Falcon Sam Wilson that Falcon won't be able to use. So for him, it's more like, maybe 6 to 8 allies he actually would be kind of motivated to play. But I think it's a pretty decent number, and I just like the combo with Air Supremacy so much that I think it's going to be good. Now, if we have ways to ready our aerial characters, but maybe not that many ways to heal them necessarily, I think Team Training could be good. This is just a powerful card in general. Mission Planning, kind of interesting. This card, can potentially stop consequential damage. We've also got new card Wingman, which I'm going to focus on. Wingman is a 0-cost upgrade which you attach to an aerial ally, and it gives that aerial ally the ability to exhaust to prevent a different aerial ally from taking 1 consequential damage. For me, I have to set up 2 allies, and one only helps the other one. I, can't flex it the other way around if I need to. It's a little bit slow. It's a little bit static. My initial impressions are that I probably don't have deck space for this in the modern card pool. If you have a smaller card collection, you might be able to fit this in and it be a more appealing option. But for me, my decks are already bursting at the seams. Getting to 40 cards means making tons of Ruthless cards. So realistically, I don't see Wingman making it into a lot of my decks. With that said, for Falcon, because you can kind of guarantee getting Red Wing or the Leadership Bird ally on turn 1 with the Alter Ego power, Wingman does have very, very consistent targets, so that is something. Now, if we are readying up our aerial characters, I think United We Stand, kind of an underrated card, can potentially do some nice healing, particularly on Expert mode. And I also want to bring the idea of Sidekick and Side-by-Side to Falcon. Now, Red Wing only has 1 attack, 1 fort. You might be thinking Side-by-Side doesn't seem very good. But if we also have Aero and or Cloud9, we can potentially be boosting up Red Wing stats a decent bit, and Falcon stats a decent bit. So readying both characters suddenly gains a lot of value. It does kind of shut down us using Red Wing's ability to bounce him back to hand and then play him again. But I think with Aero and, Flight Squadron and everything, being able to get +1 attack across multiple characters, multiple times potentially, and then readying up both those characters with that stat boost, again, I genuinely think there is a deck here. And while we're talking about being able to guarantee having an ally out turn 1, and also ways to keep allies out if we're readying them up to benefit from stat boosts again and again, we have Innovation to heal and Band Together, which just getting Red Wing guaranteed on turn 1 means Band Together will never miss, and that is pretty awesome. Now, what if you have Aero and Cloud9 out at once and you boost up both your thwarting and attack? You're kind of getting some diminishing returns. If you exhaust, let's say, your hero to benefit from Aero's attack boost, you are missing out on having, used your basic thwart to benefit from Cloud9's thwart boost. This is where we need to talk about Go All Out and Push Ahead. These cards, I believe, came with Ironheart, and you exhaust your hero and you deal damage equal to the combined total of your thwart, attack, and defense. Push Ahead is basically the same, but you're removing threat equal to the combined total of your stats. Aero and Cloud9, potentially both getting readied up, boosting your stats a lot. I think Go All Out and Push Ahead could be really fun with Falcon. Let's move on to Aggression, and since this video has already taken so long, I'm going to keep it quick for you guys. All of these cards are going to be good for Falcon. Dive Bomb, I think you're going to want Hone Technique, but Red Wing is a wild you can bounce back to hand all the time. You have Quinn carrying access because you're an Avenger. Hone Technique and Dive Bomb are going to go really well on Falcon. Over in Justice, we've got Your Roll, which is kind of the thwarting equivalent of Pitchback. Going to be really good here as well. There could be too much threat removed here for solo play because you have to thwart first, then use your unroll after thwarting to remove even more threat. But 2-player upwards, your unroll is always good. Again, 2-player upwards especially, but it's still fine in solo. You've got Agile Flight. I think this is going to be very, very good for Falcon as well. The real question mark comes with Eyes in the Sky. It's 0 cost, but the effect is very niche. It's when you would reveal a non-elite minion, exhaust an aerial character you control to cancel the effects of that card and discard it, then reveal another card from the encounter deck. It's just a lot of things. You need to get the right encounter card, you need to have the right kind of character you want to exhaust, and then you have to hope you don't get a worse card. But hey, at least it's a 0 cost Eagle Eyes upgrade. Justice has a few aerial allies, and I think all of them are good. Quasar is particularly good in solo play. Let's say you have a player side scheme with 3 threat on it. You play Quasar, the response removes 1 threat from each scheme, which could also help 0 the main scheme. Then you, with your 2 forwarding on Falcon, or a lot of other characters, can just clear the rest of that player's side scheme. It's just a handy amount of threat to remove in general. Captain Britain, I think, is a very underrated ally. It's 4 cost and double consequential, but if he attacks a minion or, thwarts a side scheme, it's only 1 consequential, which means it's a 4-cost ally with 3 forwarding and 3 attack, but only for board control purposes, not main scheme and not the villain. In 2-player upwards, especially 3-player upwards, I think this guy is just always really good. So the fact he's aerial can be paid for with, team building exercise, power of flight, triggers eagle-eyed for Falcon. I really like this. Banshee, unfortunately, I don't know if Falcon really cares about confusing minions. You could do a butterfly deck with him. In protection, we have aerial intervention, which means we have to exhaust an aerial character to prevent 3 damage. I don't hate this, especially, we'll have Red Wing and maybe even a protection bird, I don't know. Going to be an easy ally to find early on. Make sure aerial intervention always has a target that isn't your hero to exhaust, but I don't otherwise think it's going to benefit you that much. You can't see the encounter deck in the villain phase, so triggering Eagle-Eyed in the villain phase isn't that useful to me. If a Vigilant, however, being a ready is just very, very good, helps you remove threat. Excellent, that's something protection really likes. So yeah, this goes really well with Falcon. Height Advantage is a card I have quite, famously disliked. I thought it's terrible, but Falcon, I think it has its best home ever. Thanks to Draw Their Fire and Aerial Recon, we can make sure we have a lot of attacks coming our way specifically to make sure Height Advantage, which lets us take 1 less damage from each attack coming toward us for 1 round, actually has a good amount of attacks to reduce damage from it to make it worth its cost. If we were running Taunt as well, it could be another attack that Height Advantage will help with. So actually, yeah, pretty interesting. Also, just a note, there are quite a lot of cards in this game that have both the aerial trait and tactic trait. If I were to see a card in Falcon's kit that also has some kind of, interaction with the tactic trait, because actually I believe the article does say that Falcon often gives a tactical advantage to its friends, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe it's basic tactic support, I'm not really sure, but just thought that it's worth considering. Starhawk is an aerial ally. He's very, very good already. He's going to be very, very good for Sam, giving Falcon giving Sam another good aerial card to potentially play every single turn, cycle through that encounter deck, find more boost icons better, faster. I really like that. Starhawk is kind of like Red Wing, in that if you do it right, after the first time you play him, every subsequent turn, you can bounce him back to hand and play him again, and then the same next turn, and then the same the next turn, so on and so forth. Siren is kind of like Banshee. After they activate, they get to put a status card on a minion. I don't know if Falcon cares about that very much. Siren is quite expensive, not a big fan. Warpath is the next, another 4-cost ally. Kind of an interesting ability, but nothing that I think is doing anything super amazing for Falcon that I can see. So I probably lean more into Starhawk and the basic allies in protection. Moving away from the aerial specific stuff, going back to aggression, if we can use aerial recon to make sure we keep getting minions, because that's what aggression is good at dealing with, Hall of Heroes becomes very good. We do have that upgrade that lets us, potentially switch to Alter Ego out of sequence, so we can then just, draw cards, flip back to hero form, and use them immediately. I think that's potentially very good. If we're finding more minions with aerial recon, and actually, we talked about Angela, we talked about looking for trouble. These minion summoning cards, which shuffle up the encounter deck for us to find better boost icons, 1 by 1, and melee, probably with Hone Technique for melee. Just to hit these multiple targets we're bringing in, going to be good cards to have. Potentially, if we like minion summoning in leadership, we've got the Hawkeye ally as well from the core set. Absolutely underrated ally in my opinion. 2-player plus, always amazing. Solo play, often still pretty good. If you're not running an aerial leadership deck, I would be considering bringing Clint Barton. Going to leadership, we've talked about aerial leadership a lot, but we haven't talked about focusing on the Avengers side. We can run stuff like Avengers Tower, Aerosmith's Heroes, whatever we want that I've already talked about in this video. But we could just have something like Avengers Tower in the deck and a Mighty Avengers. This is a very powerful team card. Cannot be run at the same time as Flight Squadron because of the wording. but this is very, very good and definitely a very competitive alternative because Mighty Avengers is a very strong card. The Avenger allies are very good, so if you go all into Avenger allies, you're going to have a really good result with Falcon. Now, in Justice, we've already talked about one way or another, but if we're using one way or another, and even potentially, in solo, especially because of scaling, aerial recon to put extra side schemes out in play, Scout Investigator is going to trigger a lot. Chance Encounter is going to be really reliable. Followed is going to be a lot more reliable. I think that's really fun. And if we have a pretty solid supply of schemes, Clear the Area and Turn the Tide just get even better. But these are just good cards on basically every hero ever anyway, so Falcon's definitely going to like them. Over in Protection, I do think the Perfect Defense archetype actually has some legs with Falcon. In solo play, you can see the boost icon, and you can kind of leave it with a lower one potentially that's going to help you trigger, unflappable, hard to ignore, get those benefits for having taken no damage and defending. And we've got Angel's Airy, which is a 1-cost support. After you defend, you get to put counters here. Then when you go Alter Ego, which here's a card that helps him do that out of sequence, you can get some healing. So that's kind of fun and kind of thematic. I'm also curious about tech cards with Falcon. If we can defend multiple times a turn with Draw Their Fire, Electrostatic Armor is potentially going to be dealing a lot of damage back to them. If we only have a 2 defense stat to start with, we might want Energy Barrier to reduce the damage we're taking. If we do, Repurpose is on the table. Repurpose loves Ever Vigilant. It loves What Doesn't Kill Me. What Doesn't Kill Me has a physical requirement, which is easily paid for with Red Wing and Quinn Carrier. I kind of flown through these cards, but Repurpose discards a tech card and gives you a stat boost. These other cards ready you up, which means you can use that stat boost multiple times. Using a stat boost multiple times is generally a really good idea. Of course, as an Avenger, we have access to Earth's Mightiest Heroes for even more readying to combine with Repurpose, and while this isn't particularly relevant to Repurpose, Muster Courage is relevant to us being an Avenger. In Expert mode, against most scenarios, this is giving 2 tough status cards for a free cost event. This is really very good. In the late game, it can give us 3 tough status cards. I absolutely love this card for multiplayer survival. I already talked a little bit earlier in the video about War from the pool aspect, but since we can always bounce Red Wing back to hand, Red Wing is a wild resource. Rock, Paper, Scissors, which if we have a wild resource, basically guarantees us card draw, is absolutely amazing for Falcon. In a slightly less useful, less reliable way, we do have our Talon line, which lets us ready characters. Since pool allies don't take consequential damage, that's kind of interesting that we can ready those up. But I'm not too worried about that. Mostly Rock, Paper, Scissors, and War I think are going to be really fun for Falcon. Of course, Falcon does have readying. If we can boost his stats somehow, we have stick-to-itiveness. We could even boost his stats with Laser Sword, and we can use Aerial Recon to deal ourselves the correct encounter card to put out the icons we want to power up Laser Swords safely. I think that's kind of interesting, maybe a little bit janky, but sounds so fun, I want to try it. Getting toward the end of our options, finally, we have Grant Ward. Since we can kind of set up our encounter card and block a different one, we can kind of make sure we're not getting a treachery, so Grant Ward is never betraying us. He's a 0-cost ally that's really, really good. If we're in multiplayer, somebody could have the Longshot or Pete Wisdom allies, and because we can see what's on top of the encounter deck, or we can set up the perfect encounter card for somebody to receive, we can trigger their responses and get benefits that way that are actually potentially very good. Last but not least for the aspect cards in this video, I want to talk about Strength and Diversity, another new card that comes with Falcon. I'm not going to go into it in any great detail. I actually just did a separate video to try and save time in this video, so go check that out. I've got a video about this event from Falcon. But long story short is it's a 2-cost event that scales up in multiplayer, but probably a little bit easier to set up being powerful in solo play. For each different trait on friendly characters in play, remove 1 threat from a scheme or deal 1 damage to an enemy. If you play one ally with 2 different traits to him, this is pretty good value. If you play a second ally with 1 or 2 different traits to him as well, suddenly this card is extremely strong. And long story short, I absolutely love it, Falcon. One little note for this card that I forgot to say in that video is that actually Rogue and also Children of the Atom, these are cards which came up in our live stream that me and Nelson did reacting to this, I think from chat. Really very powerful. I made that video about Strength and Diversity partway through preparing this video, so I wasn't particularly thinking too much about X-Men and their support cards, but that is going to be phenomenal. It was also pointed out to me in the comments that everyone's favorite Asgardian 4 is another great character for both Strength and Diversity because he has Avenger Asgard, he can get Aerial, but also Hugin and Munin are really good for him too. So 4 is getting a lot of love in Falcon's hero pack. In terms of real decks and what Falcon is going to like, all I really know for certain is that you're going to want a bunch of aerial cards, but any stuff that kind of messes with what's on top of the encounter deck is kind of going to be kind of equivalent to triggering Eagled Eyes anyway. So I don't think you necessarily need to go all aerial and nothing else, but definitely with the team building exercise and power of flight synergy, it's going to be useful. So for just this, in addition to aerial stuff, I'm looking at encounter deck manipulation and side scheme stuff, kind of what I was talking about for Silk recently. For leadership, you can build all into aerial leadership, you could build into Avenger leadership, you could build into minion summoning and kind of hybrid that with Avengers or aerial leadership. Go All Out, I think, really has potential with Cloud9 and Aero being in the same deck. And Strength and Diversity seems very, very good. That could potentially be very strong here as well. So leadership having a lot of options for Falcon. Paul, really my favorite card set. Again, as I just said, Rock, Paper, Scissors, and War. Over in Aggression, we've got aerial aggression stuff, obviously, but also the multi-target stuff like 1x1. Protection, I'm a little bit less sure about. I definitely want the aerial stuff. Overall, if I had to compare Falcon to existing heroes in the game, there are a few candidates. I think Scarlet Witch is an obvious one. She also discards stuff from the encounter deck to get bonuses on her events and things. Angel is another one, all about playing aerial cards. Ultimately, Silk and Falcon are very different heroes, but I definitely feel like the designer's head was in the same kind of space when designing these two characters. You know, there's a kind of a through line of encounter deck special interaction. In fact, this is maybe a good time to talk about one observation I've made. Tony Fanchi, who is kind of the lead designer, I think, for Marvel Champions these days, his heroes we've received like to do really unique stuff. Cable plays with the Victory display. Domino, who we're going to talk about soon, plays with wild resources and the top of her deck. Deadpool plays with acceleration tokens. Nick plays with threat. Maria plays with all-purpose counters. Silk plays with stealing encounter cards. Falcon plays with manipulating boost cards. So I've talked about Domino already in this video, and just really the way she tries to set up the top of her deck is going to be very similar to how Falcon tries to set up the top of the villain encounter deck. Her attack and forward events, just so similar to Falcon's events, and that kind of thrill of lining up the right thing kind of by accident, whether you accidentally found a digging deep with Domino's pistols, or Falcon suddenly finds a triple boost icon card that lines up really well with what he wanted to do. There's both that kind of thrill of surprise and chasing that perfect kind of thing that you don't know if you're going to find it, but if you do, it's awesome. So if you like that from Domino, you're going to absolutely love that from Falcon. So here's a part of the video I know you guys like where I get to rate kind of how I feel like Falcon's going to play, kind of guess his power overall and stuff. Falcon looks like the perfect all-rounder, really giving me Captain America vibes. He's got, a couple of damage cards we've seen and 2 attack, fine. A couple of forwarding cards we've seen and 2 forwarding, fine. He's got 2 defense and a couple of upgrades which lean toward defense, fine. But we haven't really seen much economy for him, just the ability to use, Avengers Tower, team building exercise really consistently, power of flight, all that kind of stuff does mean I think he's actually going to have really good economy anyway. If he has any innate card draw, that's going to go even better. Speed of setup is really difficult to say. We haven't really seen any cards he particularly needs to set up. All his upgrades seem, just one-time use, except Aerial Recon, which is super incredibly powerful. He is going to want that in play, but it's just a one-cost upgrade. That is pretty easy to play whenever you find it. Reliability, how consistent is his character? If I play 10 games with him, am I going to have 10 good games? I have no idea how to rate this. I think, card by card, I have no idea if he's going to have the right boost card lined up. Different scenarios are going to have different amount of boost icons and boost stars. It's not going to be something you can predict too much. Sometimes his events and Red Wing's ability are just not going to have many great targets. Sometimes you're going to be flooded with really good targets. On the other hand, Aerial Recon is a card that exists. That card that lets us take an encounter card we can see and then block one in the future that we can't see. Being able to guarantee what one encounter card is so strong. It's very reliable because you know what you're getting and you're blocking the unknown encounter card. In that respect, in the villain phase, Falcon's reliability is off the charts once that card is in play, once Aerial Recon is around and able to do that. Card value is really interesting. It's because this is kind of a 5-star system, sometimes 6 if something is exceptional. I think Aerial Recon could potentially be a 7-star card. I don't know, I just think that is so good, so powerful. I absolutely love it. I do value control very highly. I know some players don't, but I think Falcon's ability as well, just on his identity card, to see the top card of the encounter deck, combined with Aerial Recon, those are just super powerful, and I think those are going to take Falcon a long way. Ease of play I put at 2 stars. I don't think you need to, do a lot of complex stuff to get good results with him, but you are going to need to be counting boost cards, cycling them, doing the right sequencing, and I think that is more challenging than average. And average I would put as, 3 stars in the middle of 5. Variety is 4 stars with a question mark. Now, he's going to want a bunch of aerial stuff in most of his decks. That could be low variety, but there are so many cards that interact with the top of the encounter deck that can by playing them, change what's on top of the encounter deck, which for Falcon is kind of as good as playing an aerial event. I think his aerial dominated decks are going to have a lot of variance, which offered kind of different ways to interact with the game. But also there are avenues you can take that you can go down to mess with the top of the encounter deck, but not be too heavily aerial. So I am pretty optimistic about his deck building variety. To predict his actual power, with so many question marks about his reliability, I don't know, I found this pretty hard, but I can safely say a character with really balanced stats who's potentially going to have a really safe encounter phases is just going to be good. He's going to fall somewhere in the top 3 tiers in a 6-tier system. I see absolutely no world where he's in the bottom 2, almost realistically no world where he's in the bottom 3. So I think Falcon is going to be very, very good. Whatever scenario you're facing, whatever player count you're at, I think he's going to do well. Normally, I give you some kind of number like, oh, out of 60 characters, I think he'll be the 21st best. But I have too many question marks for Falcon, and I kind of feel like my guess is almost meaningless here. I definitely think he's in the top half of characters. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Make sure to check out my giveaway if you haven't already, link in description. It's just a couple of comics for the first few days this video is live, but I think that could be really fun. I'm really excited to do that. Again, a huge thank you to Royal for giving me the opportunity to do this giveaway. I would love it if every time there was a new hero article announced, I had some codes to give away comics that tied in. I think that'd just be a super fun thing. Fantasy Flight Games, if you're watching, can you talk to Marvel? Can we do this? Can you give content creators codes to get comics, for their viewers to win? It's going to increase, excitement for the character if you get to read comics about them. It's going to help Marvel get new people interested in comic books. It seems like a great win to me. But this video has been long enough. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, anything you want to do that helps out. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.